Perhaps we can stop it before it gets to North Carolina. That's the goal. And so Aylette Colston is coming at noon. Cliff is going to kind of introduce us to the subject that we've all been talking about. And right now, I just want to invite us all to mute ourselves and have Miranda sing to us. And please sing, even though we can't hear each other. It's really helpful for the body. Like I was talking to somebody yesterday about how emotionally difficult this all is. It's so difficult. And so singing really creates like vibrations in the body. It's a reason why like monks and nuns do it for hours and hours. And so let's just sing with Randa. I'm going to mute myself and feel yourself in your body and feel yourself not alone, because we're all together trying to kind of figure this out. Okay, I'm turning it over to Randa.
Okay. Oh, good. All right. So in the chat are the words. So, okay. All right. Yeah, good. All right. Ooh. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind just stayed on freedom. Hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on justice. I woke up this morning with my mind just stayed on justice. I woke up this morning with my mind now stayed on justice. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Now I'm singing and shouting with my mind stayed on justice. I'm singing and shouting with my mind just stayed on justice. I'm singing and shouting with my mind stayed on justice. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Now I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on justice. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on justice. Now woke up this morning with my mind stayed on justice. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.
Woo! Welcome, everyone. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Tuesdays with Tillis, week number 182. We are a community of nonviolent resistance. So good to see some people we haven't seen for a while. Hi, Sarah. And is anyone here for the first time? My friends, we are going to be hacked, I'm sure, because I put the Zoom link on Twitter. We have been putting it on Facebook, but things are heating up, aren't they? And so I'm trying to spread a lot of words as well as I can. So several people are co-hosting, and they're going to be removing any people that are trying to hack us. And I thank them for that. I'm so deeply grateful that Aylette Colston is with us today, and she's going to be speaking a little later about what's happening in Portland. we've been talking about this subject. And I asked Cliff Charles to please sort of introduce this subject, give us kind of a concentrated little talk about it, because he's really good at that. And he said, well, we should invite a lawyer. And I thought, oh, my favorite lawyer, Ailette. And I called her up after he made that suggestion, and she said yes. So this is going to be great. I think that we should move on to like reports and announcements. And I want to bring the environment and climate crisis people forward. They keep doing their work, even though we rarely talk about the climate and the environment because there's so much else going on. But I want to thank them. And I don't know who's going to speak for them, but please dive in. I'm muting myself.
Okay, thanks, Karen. I didn't realize you were going to call on us today, so I don't really have much prepared. But certainly the climate crisis continues and it gets worse. And the Trump administration is trying their hardest to eliminate all of the protections that have been put in place through the EPA. They continue to try to roll back regulations and make it harder to find out what's going on, make it harder to protest, and reduce protections in terms of clean air, clean water, and et cetera. So I know Sandy's logged in. Sandy, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No.
Okay.
Dave, I would like you to do that quote on the 5 years to achieve a balance. Can you do that one for the group?
Oh, yeah. She's talking about the greenhouse gas emissions budget that was published in the IPCC report back in 2018. There was a lot of news that came out back then about we only have 12 years left if we want to keep warming to less than 1.5 degrees C. The thing that nobody paid attention to was the likelihood of success at that level was only 50%. So, you know, we're betting our climate's future on the flip of a coin. If you want to have a higher chance of success, you need to lower the emissions to such a level that there's really only 5 years left in order to keep warming at 1.5 degrees or less.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate that you all continue to work on this. The chat has been really busy, so I'm gonna turn to it. So one thing is, Jan, do you want to? A number of us were at Strike for Black Lives yesterday. I saw Lori and Elena with masks. Sometimes it's hard to tell who's there. But Jan, do you want to talk about the Can't Pay, Won't Pay Durham event on Saturday?
I don't know anything about it, except that apparently there were a lot of arrests. I think it was the one that was at the old police building. And so there was, I don't know. I don't really know. That's why I'm asking. I've heard just so little about it.
Okay. Anybody know? I don't know.
We drove past it and there were cop cars everywhere around that block. There weren't very many people that we saw actually out protesting. It was, you know, probably a dozen, maybe dozen and a half that were out there, but there were probably at least that many cops there at the time. But like
I don't know.
Past it.
I don't know if it was that day, but there were 29 arrested that broke into the old police station and unfurled banners and broke windows. And I don't know which day it was.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe we can invite one of the Durham organizers to come talk to what's happening in a future week. Michael, yeah, this is a real problem. Can you want to say what you put on chat about Voice of America? Unmute.
the Trump administration, and Donald Trump specifically, I'm sure, has told the Voice of America that their voice is no longer free. We will tell you what to say. So, I mean, this is the same, the whole playbook is all the same. I mean, this is his effort to control everything through the election, that there will be no election because he's not going to. And the problem is, in my mind, will be that on election day, he is going to be leading throughout the day because most of the votes are going to come in absentee and they won't be counted for 4 or 5 days. So he will say it's illegitimate. I won the election on election day and I'm not going to lead. And he's going to control everything, and he'll have his people placed in every major city across the United States to quell the violence. And it's really scary. And I asked the question before. I'm not so sure that these are people of the military or even employees. These could be, for all I know, part of Eric Prince's shadow military, or it could be right-wing anarchists. I don't know who they are. And it's very scary to see these people out there just grabbing people, kidnapping them off the streets for doing nothing other than exercising their First Amendment right. And tonight, I also put out there that supposedly his coronavirus task force is going to have nobody to speak about the coronavirus. So it's going to turn into another campaign rally. And his patriotic mask, he goes to a fundraiser last night and shows up with no mask on. So I guess he's not patriotic after all. You're muted, Karen.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Mike. So here's the thing. Yes. And we're going to spend most of this whole thing on what's happening in Portland and about these deployments. It's definitely true. I think one of the reasons why he probably targeted Portland is because there are a lot of right-wing militia there, and probably some of these guys are those people. And we've been preparing for this ever since the inauguration. Probably every single one of us has been seeing this coming and preparing for it. So I feel like part of our work is slowing down. I, like probably all of us, have been obsessively looking at the news, at Twitter, at Facebook, at what's happening in Portland. And so what I'm hoping is that hearing from Cliff and then Ailette on this subject, we can kind of craft a more skilled response than what I've been doing. I have been feeling that the activists who have been out there for 3.5 years and much longer, for decades, are ready for this. And we just need to coordinate, mobilize, and organize. So I'm wondering if we want to just go on to this subject, since Cliff and Ailette are both here. Is that okay with everyone? Speak up with anything urgent if you have anything that's urgent besides that. And you can keep putting things in the chat.
This is Maple. I had a quick announcement for environmental. There is an online rally against that Mountain Valley pipeline that still wants to come through, and it's an Indigenous lady who does the missing and murdered Indigenous women. Crystal, she's doing it. It's and I put the Facebook event right in the chat there. That's at 10 o'clock on Saturday, and then there's a shoe strike, pretty quiet, down at Chapel Hill Plaza. Also from 10 but till 2 o'clock on Saturday, where Extinction Rebellion, you put all these shoes, you lay them all out with messages on climate. So that's a really interesting European action that's going on right in Chapel Hill also on Saturday.
Thanks so much, Maple, and put everything that that we need in order to attend that protest in the chat, and Jewel will mail that out afterwards. Okay, Sandy, quick.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just want to say it was reported, you maybe know this, but I didn't. A Navy officer questioned some of this militia in Oregon.
Yes.
And they broke his hand.
Well, if you look at the footage, they beat him severely with their batons all over his body before they broke his hand. You're absolutely right. That's one of the, and you know, they've also shot someone in the head with a rubber bullet. Yes, that's
Navy. That Navy vet.
What?
That Navy vet was so tough. He just showed how wimpy these guys were to use clubs, and he just stood there and took it. It was amazing.
It was amazing.
I like
Just
what
John
he
Lewis.
said. He said, what he said though was, I went there with a Navy shirt and a Navy hat. And if they're going to do that to me, they're going to do it to moms. That's really what I liked, that he equated not this big tough guy, which he was, but he equated it with women and mothers and citizens. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. So everyone should be muted right now except Cliff and then Ailette. Thank you all so much.
Hey, good morning, everybody. This is Cliff in Durham. For those of you who can't see me on the screen, Karen asked that I at least introduce and facilitate some discussion about the situation in Portland that's been going on over the last few days and weeks. Looks like right now we've got about 59 people on this Zoom call. And so let's just think about this as a 59-member panel discussion that everybody can feel free to participate in, and we want to get feedback from everybody. I think the way that I'd like to approach this, if it's okay, is just simply, I will try to help us focus on just our own reactions to what's going on, what stands out to us. And ultimately, it's my sense that much of what's going on is a legal and constitutional matter. And that is why I'm so glad that our sister and colleague, Ailette Colston, is with us to join in that discussion and amplify that. But I think that all of us have been watching with great concern over the last number of days and weeks about the violence and the abridgment of constitutional rights that's been going on over the last maybe 7 weeks, ever since the killing of George Floyd. And I just want to remind you of some of the things that we've seen. We've seen protests. We've seen movements against the federal facilities in Portland. We've seen, in some cases, arrests of peaceful demonstrators. We've seen shooting of a protester in the head and face area, causing a skull fracture. Those are just some of the things that we've seen. But I want to turn it over to the rest of the people out there in Tuesday with Tillis Zoomland to speak on the things that have been most upsetting, most concerning to you.
Are you, hi, this is Ailette. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
If you're ready for me to dive in with a little bit of legal context, or do you want to talk about reactions first? I don't want to jump the gun.
Yeah, I want to make sure that our group has enough of a chance to identify the things that are most concerning to them. And just give voice to that, and then we can kind of transition to the legal implications of everything.
This is Doyle. I think that the thing that concerns me is the parallel to Hitler's brown shirts, and that this is just the first shot in what's going to be a massive attempt to quelch dissent. And it's just so very frightening. And I think I think our only chance is for the leadership of Congress to just come down on this and just be very, very loud and object and not tolerate it at all.
I think that, like everything else that this sociopathic, narcissistic fool does, is divert. No matter what he does, he's got to take away from the last thing. 140,000 Americans are dead. Almost 4 million have been contracted this virus. So he's got another way to take care of things by taking our mind. And this is equal, not, I don't know if it's equally as serious, but this, yeah, it is. This could be worse. This is the end of the Constitution. But he's diverting. And now we're worried about people on the streets. I posted in the chat, what do our silent senators say if all of a sudden on the streets in Raleigh, we got a federal building here, and Charlotte, I'm sure, has got banks. What are they going to say when the brown shirts are marching through the streets of our cities in North Carolina?
Nothing.
Well, they better say something, because this is their future too. This is really, really, really something that I shouldn't say I never dreamed of it, but this is really scary. And this is going to be very violent, and it's frightening.
I agree, but our Republican senators are not going to do anything. They have shown us that for 3.5 years. So that raises the question, what do we do? Because we've pleaded with those people. I know all of you have called, and they're unwilling. They have drunk the Kool-Aid, and they are not. Trump is their man, and they're not going to defy him in any manner that I can see. So I am very upset, concerned, and as a student of history, whoever said it's like Hitler and the brown shirts, the stormtroopers, we're there. We're there. So
yeah, this is above and beyond any laws. We are going to have to stand and be strong against a wave that is huge and powerful, and we have got to wrest that power from them. Absolutely.
I think what concerns me the most is that we haven't yet seen a complete flooding of the streets. I mean, there are more of us than there are of any number of those Border Patrol people or whoever else he's cobbled together, because apparently the military won't do it for him. And we just need to flood the streets. They physically can't move if there are more of us surrounding everything they try to do. And that's a nonviolent and powerful response from people. I don't think we need to care what they talk about in Congress or what legislation they do or don't pass. We just need to put our bodies, there are more of us. So that's what we should do.
Absolutely. This is Lib commenting that I'm also very concerned that this may be a military experiment with the minds of the police that are being used. That is a rumor. I have no idea for sure, but they have no identification. You can't, when did we start sending troopers out with no name tags and nothing to tell us exactly who they are? But if this is a mind experiment, if we can stop it in Portland, if we can stop it there, then, we will not have it across the country. So I'm so grateful for folks in Portland who are standing up. And then, of course, all that's already been suggested, we are more powerful. There are more of us, and we are nonviolent, and we will learn how to be even more nonviolent, like the guy from the Navy who stood it and took it. And
at this point, I'd like to just interject that I put in the chat a link to an article that I happened upon this morning from The Nation that describes a House bill that is being sponsored later this week by Representatives Ocasio-Cortez and Eleanor Holmes Norton that will require officers to identify themselves going forward. So there is that movement. Another idea that was put out there was at some point that maybe the state and local officials could exercise their ability to arrest these police who have been sent by the federal government, to the extent that those police go beyond their mandate to protect federal facilities. So that's another thing to do. I would also just finish my thought here by saying, Karen mentioned something in the tiny letter this past weekend, that the death of John Lewis and C.T. Vivian reminds us of what has been left for us to do to carry on, and that they have provided a model for how we can deal with oppression by the state. And so that can be something to keep in our mind's eye about how we might want to proceed. But more reactions from the rest of you. And unmute yourself.
I just want to say that, for a guy who brags about a cognitive test, having a perfect score and not realizing how utterly stupid he is, getting off of him with Pompeo giving a speech about Christians in America and humanitarian rights yesterday or the day before, Barr going to Notre Dame and broadcasting his philosophy about Christianity and how the secular society has taken over, that the depth of all of this is so stunning. It's so stunning and it's so terrifying. And I know I'm not saying, I just have to say that. Because we're all, a lot of us anyway, I think are in our homes alone. I feel like a crazy person. I lay on my pillow at night and I look at the sky and the trees outside my window and I think, what is tomorrow going to bring? And there are 50 things that in any other time in our history, one of those would have been the issue for the time. And it's every day times 365 times 4.
So I just want to break in.
You've muted yourself, Karen.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just want to break in. You're absolutely right. And I just want to call our attention to our bodies right now, because you're speaking the truth. And our task is to learn how to hold all of that truth, to look at all that truth. I don't know about you, but I know a lot of people who are keeping calm by not looking at it. And our determination has been to look at it. So I think, Susan, you're articulating so well what's happening to so many of us. And I just want to call us to a practice right now and in the future of grounding ourselves, taking a deep breath, feeling our bodies, understanding that we've been preparing for this our whole lives, and we signed up for this. Those of us who are on this call, we signed up for this, and we can meet this challenge. And I love that, Cliff. I love that what you said, Cliff, because I think that the calmness of John Lewis came from facing adversity after adversity and finding the peace within himself and finding a way to surround everyone he was with that peace. And we're all being called to that practice now. We're all being called to that practice. So thank you, Cliff. I'm sorry to break in. I'm turning it back over to you.
Oh, yeah. Well, not a problem. And I appreciate that comment. And I do think it would be a good time, unless there's any final thoughts, to begin.
Cliff,
looks like, okay, Michael and then Bessie.
Unfortunately, he surrounded himself with so many sycophants that just no matter what he does, it's okay with them. I think it could boil down to the only thing that could possibly, if this gets really out of hand, the only thing that in my mind is some of the generals who've now stood up to him, is that the military could hopefully turn on him. Otherwise, I don't know what defense we might have, because he owns the Department of Justice with Bill Barr. He owns the courts. So where do we go? Maybe Alet can tell us.
And Bessie?
Good morning. I would like to hear from that. Why is it that local police can't arrest these people? We don't know who they are. We're just taking it on somebody's word that they're federal. But if they're not labeled and identifiable, then why can't they be arrested? Do we just have to sit back and take this because we think or somebody thinks that they're federal?
That's probably a good occasion for Alet, if you're ready, to address that and other items that you had on your agenda.
Sure. At first, can everyone hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Yep. I'm wearing my son's gaming headset because I find it helps not have that feedback problem. But first, and this is something we all have heard before and we know, but it's a good reminder that when it comes to authoritarian takeovers, fascism, that we don't want to comply in advance. And part of that, I think, is language. I think language is very important when we talk about this, and I'll circle back to that in a moment. But there's a movie about, it's actually supposed to be a comedy. It's called The Death of Stalin. And it's a dark comedy. And I watched it again fairly recently, and one thing that really strikes me with that, even that movie, and then thinking about what's going on here is, Stalin was one man. He was one person. One human being cannot decimate millions of people unless a lot of people go along with it. I mean, Stalin was able to do what he did because people went along with it. Lots of people just kept going along with it and deferred to him. And even though they knew he could turn on anyone at any time, and Donald Trump is one man. He is one human being, not a very good human being, not our best example, but he's one, just only one. And so it's everyone going along with him that is the greater problem. And it's exacerbated because in that sphere of people, they tend to be authoritarians. And so they're probably, most people on this call are not the kind of people who will just kind of go along with what someone else says. So, and we've probably been like that from the moment we were born. But just, we have to remember he is one person, and we need to make sure we don't comply in advance. So, just to touch on the broader legal field. First off, let's talk about federal jurisdiction for just a second. So and this is all stuff I'm just reminding you. So the federal government is a government of limited powers and can only step in when specifically authorized, very generally. Most criminal laws in the United States are a matter of state law, not federal law. And the feds can only detain someone or arrest someone. They only have jurisdiction if it's a federal crime, a specific federal crime that is enumerated by statute, or if it happens on federal property, like kind of regular crimes. If they happen on federal property, then the feds have jurisdiction. So they should not be seizing people off the street who have not been charged with any, and there's no warrant or anything. And no law official in the United States should detain someone without probable cause. We're talking basic Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, Fifth Amendment, due process. I mean, these are kind of our most kind of fundamental things, but they've been seizing people off the street who are not on federal property, who are like blocks away. I've spent some time because when you're not local, as we know, when people report on things that happen in North Carolina, it can be hard to figure out what's going on. But I've spent some time trying to kind of look at things in Portland, even though I'm not very familiar with the area. They've been seizing people, blocks away from the federal courthouse there, and not with probable cause, that articulable probable cause. It's not clear there's any federal statute. So, and the Fourth Amendment, we've got Fourth Amendment, that's the search and seizure. Fifth Amendment issues. I mean, these are kind of these very fundamental process issues of not having authority and not having legal justification for what they're doing. Now, you guys know this, but just, law is not magic. Sometimes people will say, well, they can't do that. That's unconstitutional. Well, the wheels of justice are slow, as we know. We also know laws can be changed. They can change interpretation in some way to give things legitimacy. So we can't wait for the law to kind of catch up with this, if that makes sense. Because sometimes I'll hear people say, well, that's unconstitutional. They can't do that. And they think that's just kind of the end of it. But we don't have time here to kind of wait for everything to kind of go through the whole process, if that makes sense. But I do think it's very important when we talk about this and when we're posting about it online and things like that, that we use accurate language. If you say things like officers arrested people in Portland, it already gives it legitimacy because you're calling them officers, you're calling it an arrest. I've been calling it an extrajudicial kidnapping. You don't have to necessarily say that. You could just use descriptive language saying, men in military outfits have been snatching people off the streets and putting them into unmarked vans, and we don't know exactly why. I mean, you could just use descriptive language, but we don't want to comply in advance by kind of giving them this kind of fig leaf of legitimacy by using the language that we would use if there was some problem, So I'm not calling them arrests. I'm not calling them officers, and I think that's really important. That we don't go along with the idea that this is somehow, it's not even really a question. Does that make sense? Because it's one thing to say like, well, maybe that was an improper arrest, or they should have, read the Miranda before, but we're not even in that territory. I'm not calling them officers. I'm not calling it arrests. We do not comply in advance. And language is important, especially because for those of us who are not physically in Portland, so we have to help how we can from a distance. And we can help from a distance. There's a few things that we can do. Number one is we can amplify Portland voices, the people who are on the ground in Portland who have been writing about this. There's independent journalists and photojournalists. So if we're on social media, we can boost their voices, things like likes, retweets, reposting, so that their voices are getting out of just Portland. We need to show that the entire country cares about this. It's not just Portland, because I think they picked Portland on purpose because, Portland's kind of wacky, right? I grew up in a small southern town. Sometimes when I look at stuff in Portland, I'm like, what are they doing? But honestly, they could do whatever. You don't kidnap people off the streets because of, graffiti or whatever. That's, that's just not okay. And even some of the kind of worse stuff that some of the protesters have done that we wouldn't have necessarily done in our tradition. Honestly, I've seen worse stuff at fraternity parties, and you did not see federal agents and going around arresting everyone who looks like a frat brother. You know what I mean? Like you don't just categorize. And I think, we have to agree that some of the stuff, it's not polite church going behavior, but you don't kidnap people for that at an entire category of people, So anyways, we amplify Portland voices. That includes, in my view, commenting under articles that are already being written about it. The New York Times, Washington Post are beginning to write, but there's so much going on. It's hard to keep up with it. Which I think can include things like saying, "Hey, New York Times, you're calling this an arrest. This is not an arrest." Like writing the people who wrote the article, things like that, and just saying, and because just one person, but if we all keep doing it, it's coming from all over the country. We're not just doing it only from Portland. We can amplify those voices. The other thing is to the extent we can, we need to help make enough of a ruckus to make sure that the international press is covering this. I think this is probably something we've talked about in different issues before, but if you look back over the past 100 so years of progress that has been made in America, each time one part of the kind of inflection that helped make that change was when things were covered in the international press and people in America got it to that point. But like, Emmett Till, the pictures of Emmett Till were in a French newspaper. And so it makes it harder for them to hide stuff here when it's also in other countries. The images from Bloody Sunday and Selma were there was an international reporter that day. And it helps bring pressure on Washington if people in other countries are like, you guys are doing bad stuff. And so you've lost the moral authority here. I mean, that helps bring that next level of pressure. Even 100 years ago with the suffragists, the women suffragists, a big inflection point was when they embarrassed the president in front of foreign dignitaries when the German Kaiser came to America, and the women protesters were all out there with signs for about to the Kaiser saying, I can't remember the exact language, but it made the president so mad that then he arrested all the suffragettes and threw them in jail. And that made everybody so mad that was what kind of finally freed up that logjam a little bit. So, to the extent any of us, and you never know, like, who might see something. So if you've got contacts, friends in other countries, tag them in, be like, have you been following the story in Portland? Because you never know. Maybe they have a teenager who's a K-pop fan, and the story will go in there. You never know. You never know how the different kind of pots of people are ways in. So we can just keep amplifying what's going on in Portland, because it's imperative that we show we're all paying attention. And I know there's a lot going on, and that's part of what Steve Bannon's, that he calls flooding the zone with shit. And so I think also, and it's tempting to not, it's hard for me because I get distracted on so many different things, but, I think it's worth spending a couple days doing nothing but posting and calling just on this, including calling our senators, even though we know they do not give a rat's ass. I mean, excuse my bad language, but I've obviously been in quarantine too long. But I'm cussing all over the place now. But because staffers pick those calls up. I mean, they talk to their friends. They're like, even people in North Carolina seem to care what's going on. So every little bit, we can just show that we're paying attention all the way in North Carolina, and we're very concerned about this. We can really help and push that, and call our people in Congress, and just keep on it and amplifying what's happening. I do think absolutely that we need to. I think all the concerns are very warranted. I tend to be, and I think it's an American tendency that we always want to look at things in a more rosy way, and I always try to end on an upbeat. And this is serious. I mean, this is serious, and I do think we need to take it seriously. Not that we need to hide under our beds, but the opposite. We need to go out and be loud now, and think about everything we can do now to try to amplify what's happening there and the voices there, and try to help other people see the people in Portland as real people, and realize this could happen here. I mean, these are extrajudicial kidnappings, and this is what happened. I mean, not only in Nazi Germany, but more recently, I'm most familiar with Argentina under the Peronistas, when you had the dirty war in the 70s, and these things they start slow, and then all of a sudden it's very fast, and people are kind of always oddly surprised. Like when you're reading about in a history book, you're always like, why didn't people leave? Why didn't they earlier? And it's because you believe you have these things in place, and you're like, okay, there's these arrests, but probably they did something wrong. It's like, it's easy to kind of, and so we kind of can't wait. I think America is up to the challenge if we all focus on it and amplify the voices, and make sure we're using the descriptive language about what it really is. And I think that we are capable. I mean, I don't, we don't have to be just completely hopeless, but we also can't assume that, someone smarter or more important than us is going to come along and take care of it. It's really going to be everyone going out. And, and if it comes here, we, we need to be prepared. And in my view, I think it's always very important to think about what the images look like. So I would say we all need to all of us put on our church clothes and go out there with cameras and record everything. Because, I mean, you guys, you've seen me at the protests, and I'm usually, at home, I'm wearing my pajamas right now, but when I'm at the protests, I'm wearing a church dress and pearls. And that's because a cop is going to look like a jerk shooting someone who looks like they're going to church. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm very intentional about that, because that's also that's how I got involved in NAACP, was because I was like, I was worried about, in 2013, I was worried about violence against protesters. And I thought, if there's a white lady in church clothes standing in front of everybody, they're not going to do anything. You know what I mean? Like, because we know those optics, like, we know this is the way things are. And so I don't know, people can do different things. I lean into it. I'm like, I'm going to make sure that it looks really bad on the evening news if you attack this crowd, because just let me standing here, and that's not fair and it's not right, but that's the way it is. So I'm going to do what I'm going to use that to the extent I can to help keep other people safe. And we all can do that, because the images are important. How it looks to people on the news, and how those pictures look when they turn up in the international press. So that's, I think those of us who've been at protests over the past month, I know I've seen things I would not have expected to see just right here in Raleigh, when the state patrol started using tear gas on peaceful protesters. I mean, they really escalated in a way that was absolutely unwarranted. I mean, it was fairly stunning to see it in my own town. So I'm not saying it can't happen here, because we know it can happen here, but I think that we just have to think it through and be prepared, and do what we can and do everything we can to amplify our folks in Portland. I've reached out to some people I've started following in Portland, just to say, hey, stay strong. We're all the way in North Carolina, but we are paying attention to you, and we're trying to lift your voices. We got you. And that they were glad to hear that. We have to just kind of do what I can. And let me know if anyone has any questions.
Hi. So, as I understand it, they're hiding behind this executive order that Trump signed to protect the monuments and whatever, the statues and all that. Can you sort of elaborate on the extent that an executive order like this would have in terms of the power that he can send troops or whatever, and then how much of that falls into the states' rights and all of those kinds of things that it should really kind of fall under?
I don't know of any kind of fundamental aspect of the law in America that by executive order, the president can unilaterally authorize these extrajudicial kidnappings. I mean, which is happening. I mean, protecting federal monuments. And of course, most of the monuments have been taken down. Remember, we're not federal anyway. They can legitimately be, like, let's say, on the property of a federal courthouse. And if something is happening right there, if there's probable cause and there's a crime committed in front of, that kind of thing, if someone's on federal property. But it is unclear to me that there's any really legitimate authority that the president even could do under a executive order for what is actually happening. because, people will might bring up, oh, well, think about, when they had the Fed sent in to help integrate schools, for example. Well, that was a court order. They were there to help facilitate a court order that was being ignored by the local, and then it was the National Guard that was sent in to help. And then they weren't randomly arresting people off the streets either. But even when they went in, that the Supreme Court had already ordered integrating schools and things like that. So, people want to say, oh, what about this? What about that? They're not really comparable. There's nothing I can think of that's really quite like this that's happened in the United States in modern history. I mean, since the end of the Civil War, I can't think of, the end of Reconstruction. I can't think of anything quite like this. And Reconstruction, even, you could arguably the South was occupied territory. I mean, that was a different, I don't see anything in modern history that really justifies what's actually happening. It gives it just enough kind of a sort of a patina of legitimacy. But for what is actually happening, you can't just randomly attack someone, have federal agents just randomly attacking or snatching people because they belong to a certain category of person. If you're wearing all black and on the streets of Portland, they can't just, I can't see any way that an executive order can kind of come over that. It does give them sort of some talking points and some things that kind of sound legitimate. Do you know what I mean? Like it's that thing of language that it's, where it's sort of like a fig leaf, it's just enough. And then I think the press, and I understand this, they're not comfortable reaching kind of a legal conclusion. They're not lawyers. They don't want to say, and I'm oftentimes timid myself without looking at everything first. You want to say, well, maybe there's some way this is legitimate I haven't thought of, or, whatever. But if you kind of just keep going back to this basic, Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, limited jurisdiction of the feds, there's not it is to me not what is actually happening in Portland could not be legitimized by any executive order. I mean, it's past. We do have a little bit of a proof problem because we do have a lot of the reports of people being snatched and whatnot are not necessarily, they're not all on video. But I've heard enough reports of people being taken and they're driven around for about an hour and a half before anyone tells them what's going on or anything. I mean, that would be terrifying. I mean, terrifying. If men grabbed me off the streets, pulled a beanie over my eyes, and just drove me around for an hour and a half without talking to me, I would, no exaggeration, probably pee my pants. I would be that scared. I mean, I would be that terrified. And when you're that terrified, I mean, that's literally terrorism. They are literally using terror as a weapon. And I don't think there's we need to be very descriptive in our language and not use the language that kind of characterizes this as legitimate. And I know, and a lot of you guys know me, some of you don't know me as well, but I really do try to be careful and judicious in my language and not to overly inflame or go to, but I do think this is really serious. Like, I don't think, I don't think I'm being overly dramatic about this, the seriousness of this. I think we can still halt it. But, we need to encourage all of the activists and different pots of people we know to focus on this, which is, it's very hard to focus. We've got a pandemic. We've got so much going on. I can come back and talk about challenges with elections. I think we should do that as a separate topic because I think we need to spend the next few days focusing on this and amplifying what's going on there. And in every way we can think of, because it's really public pressure that we need. And I love the law. I believe in being a country of law and the processes, but it's not going to save us in this case. We need to have public pressure immediately in every way. And that can be just amplifying, the accounts of people who are there. It can be writing and calling our representatives and senators. I know they don't really care, but their staffers, other people, just even if, and the thing is even if, let's say, Tillis comes out and says something stupid about Portland, at least he's talking about Portland. You know what I mean? At least it raises the issue. We can push back on it because there's so much crap going on. It's easy to lose focus on what's happening. So even if they come out and say a bunch of BS about it, at least that's the topic, and it gives us a chance to push back, because we need to make sure that people are talking about it and that that we make enough noise that it gets to the international press. I don't know if any of you guys ever remember the Horton Hears a Who story from Read It to Your Kids or anything, but when they get to the point that, you guys know what I'm talking about? Wave if you have any idea what I'm talking about. The Horton Hears a Who. And if you don't know, it's like an elephant hears a noise coming out of like a tiny speck of dust. And it's because all these little tiny little creatures are all yelling at the same time. And so each one of them is really tiny, but since they all yelled at the same time, they made enough noise that an elephant could hear the speck of, these creatures smaller than a speck of dust. So even though each of us are not necessarily, hugely important by ourselves, if we all make noise, we could be like the Who's and Whoville. We all yell as loud as we can. We can help make sure that we get the attention this issue needs. And they're doing a good job in Portland. I stayed up way too late watching all the live feeds last night. And they had the moms out there. They were singing beautiful songs. And that kind of thing's just the optics. It's not fair. And I never want to criticize the way anyone else protests at any point, but the optics, when it gets to serious, are important. So I'm glad to see some of the more organized stuff that happened. And of course it devolved last night too. It's not that saves you. Having a bunch of peaceful middle-aged moms is not going to save you, but it looks so much worse when you see the feds tear gassing a bunch of middle-aged ladies out there. It's not fair. I'm not saying that's fair, but this is the world we live in, and we got to use the tools we have. So us middle-aged ladies, we can be a shield just with our so-called respectability. That's something
I
that we can
think
do.
that was part of the brilliance of the civil rights movement, is that it was more than just people exercising strong will. They actually were strategic in thinking about how to, if you will, manipulate the perception of the movement for the media's benefit and for the nation's benefit. And that's exactly what is required now. It needs this moment requires us to think this through, to be strategic and disciplined and purposeful in our activity. There's always going to be, some people who decide that they want to destroy property or they want to loot or something, but the overwhelming majority of the people who are protesting in Portland and around the nation are people who have a clear moral purpose around everything from Black Lives Matter to our prospective descent into authoritarianism.
I think that's a perfect way to end this. Thank you, Cliff. Thank you, Ailette. That was absolutely what we needed to hear, all of it. We'll be inviting you back. You're amazing. I am feeling the need to keep talking about this, and I'm going to put in the chat the idea that those of us who want to put our heads together about this have a Zoom at 11:30 on Thursday for people who can be part of it. In the meantime, all of us can follow these suggestions that Ailette made, and maybe those of us who do get together on Thursday to talk further about this, having followed some of these suggestions, we'll have something to offer the tiny letter over the weekend. Does that sound okay to some people? So but I do want to respect our time and have Randa lead us in the closing song, and then Susan's gonna do the closing. And when Susan's done doing the closing, don't forget to unmute yourself, because I'm hoping Scarlett will lead us in a chant. Thank you all, beautiful, beautiful people. We're all in this together.
Radio. See if I can find. Oh, there we go. Oh, here is no no.
Actually, Michael's leading us in this. So I'm not.
I'm sorry, Michael. There you go, Mike. Go ahead.
Yeah. So. Right.
Go ahead. Take it away.
So
Unmute.
Here are the lyrics. Yep.
Okay.
There we go. I wasn't prepared to sing the Dylan song. I had my ukulele here, and I'm all ready to do Vote Him Out. I thought that's what we'd agreed on, and I thought we were talking about the Dylan privately for next time.
No. Okay.
We are doing Vote Him Out. We're doing Vote Him Out.
It's coming right up. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
Vote him out. Vote him out. What election day it's all about. We'll put some new ones in and start it all again. Cause we don't like who's in there. Vote them out. Well, mail-in ballots sure would help things out. Cause Trump will try to put election day in doubt. Are you will end deceit and fraud and restore the rule of law. Just need an honest chance. Vote them out. Vote them out. Yeah, vote them out. When they're gone, sing and dance and shout. We'll vote some good ones in and start this thing again. Cause we don't like losing, but vote them out. Let's get to work, we sure know how. Be fierce, love strong, protect the future now. Let's end the fraud and lies, get that White House sanitized. That nasty virus Trump, vote him out, yeah, vote him out. When he's gone, sing and dance and shout. We'll bring some good ones in and start the show again. We don't like who's in there, vote him out. We're praying hard that Trump can stay well, or else the country's sure to go to hell. Imagine they get sick. We'll turn communist right quick, and Comrade Nancy's there. Who can tell? Vote him out, yeah, vote him out. I want to hold your hand, I want to sing and just and shout. We'll vote some good ones in and the show again. And if you don't like who's in there, vote him out. And if you don't like who's in there, vote him out. You got to get my Dylan voice ready for next week. I'll do what I can. Sing with one lung. Thank you all. It was very, very illuminating, and move forward with determination and positive energy.
Wow. Thank you, Michael. I'm just going to invite everyone to
take a deep breath and let that music be how we end our time. As Karen said in the beginning, the music has such a positive impact on our bodies and our minds and our souls. And to begin and end with music is the way we can stay in this together for the long haul. So thank you. We have talked about some deeply, deeply troubling matters today. And I want to also acknowledge that and thank Cliff and Ayelet for leading us through how to think about what is happening and giving us activities, ways to respond. In these deeply troubling times, as John Lewis said, these are the times to make good trouble, necessary trouble. And we can draw on his strength, his spirit, CT, Vivian's spirit, this great cloud of witnesses who have left us and left us with work to do. Left us with work to do to continue making good trouble. John Lewis said, "You are a light. You are the light. And never let anyone, any person, or any force dampen, dim, or diminish your light." So keep on shining. Keep on shining. Thank you all.
Everyone unmute yourself. Is everyone unmuted?
Yes.
All right. Forward together.
Not one step back.
Forward together.
Not one step
back. Forward together.
Not one step back.
Everyone, thank you, especially Cliff and Ayelet. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Glad
you.
we inside, not out the heat.
Yes.
Love
Yes.
you guys.
We were talking about that, George. We were glad not to go out.